Hello and welcome. This is John Bloom of Bloom Consulting, and today we're going to talk about stored procedures in Microsoft SQL Server. You may have seen the prior two videos that talked about select statements and views, so this is the third in the series. So basically, what we did in the first two videos was we talked about select statements and how to join tables between two tables in a database. Next, we went ahead and created a view. Now we have this view which is available for consumption. However, in the world of data, we also can wrap it in another layer, and that layer happens to be called stored procedures. The stored procedures have existed for a long time. I used to work with stored procedures 20 years ago, perhaps. I remember at the utility company, it was actually with the Oracle product, and these stored procedures were nested in packages. And the thing about the Oracle stored procedures was that it was command line, and command line is basically like DOS. So we used a product called Toad, and Toad allowed us to write some cool packages that called other packages, that called stored procedures, and it was a lot of fun. And that was actually called PL SQL. I think the year was 98. I remember that the Toad product was awesome back then. There was a cost associated with it, so they only gave it to a few programmers. So luckily, I was one of them. Fast forward to today, SQL Server gives you the flexibility of viewing your data within the IDE, which is called SQL Server Management Studio. So here we are connected to one of our databases on the local laptop, and we'll go ahead and click down to our database in question, and then we shall click to stored procedures, and from there you'll see that there are no stored procedures at the moment. So we'll try the other database and see if we have any luck. And in this case, we do. So as you can see, it has prefix with the schema, and we'll go ahead and right click and say modify. So that allows you to modify the database. And what you do is you name it the procedure based on your schema and the name. In this case, it looks like they underscored it with USP to signify it's a stored procedure. And then these here are called parameters, and they're prefixed with an @ symbol to indicate that it's a parameter, and then they have a type. In this case, it's an integer, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no decimal point. This one is a date time, and there's a whole slew of other types within the SQL world in which you can create your parameters. Now, in this case, let's see what they're doing. Well, this is a with, so that's nice, and we call these CTEs. So a CTE allows you to create nested select statements, which you create an alias, and then in this case, well, there's your alias, and then it looks like they predefined the output column names ahead of time, so that's nice. And then after your CTE, you can call that CTE by reference down here immediately after the actual contents of the embedded CTE. So that's how they did it. And then it looks like they're doing some group bys and some order bys. So that's very nice. But you know, as a programmer, we're often tasked with creating a lot of work in a short time. So one thing that you learn rather quick is to reuse code. Now, reuse code and programming go hand in hand. So in this case, I'm just going to, let's see if this works. Nope, Control R. For some reason, it doesn't work on this machine. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to leverage the existing code there and just change it from alter to create, and I'm going to call it, in this case, I'll call it Bloom Consulting Stored Procedure Demo 1. So there you go. And I think I'll leverage the date field. I don't necessarily need an int in this stored procedure, so we're going to call this, if we go back to our view, you'll see that we have an order date key. So we'll go ahead and leverage that. We're going to name our parameter order date key, and we'll get rid of our little brackets there. And now we have a date time. So that's nice and all, but I think we need a start. Oh, we'll put it at the end there, suffix. Start and comma to indicate it's a new field, new parameter. And so we have two parameters for our stored procedure that hasn't been created yet, a start and an end. And there's our select statement, because we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to leverage the existing view that's already been created. Now, it's good practice sometimes to remove the database from the from clause, and what you do is you specify it here in the use statement. Now, one thing you have to remember with stored procedures when you're creating them is that you have to follow it with an end statement. So I try to avoid typing whenever possible. So there you go. And then we added the end. So to be honest, I could probably create that stored procedure right now. And let's go ahead and verify that it's syntactically correct. There you go. And let's go ahead and, now even though it specifies the master database, we'll go ahead and execute this puppy. And there you go. Now let's execute it again. Oh, look at that. We got an error. Why? Because it's already an object. You can't create something that's already created. So we'll just go ahead and change that to alter. And now we can change it as many times as we like. So that's terrific. So these parameters aren't currently doing anything. So why do we have them? Well, let's go ahead and declare some new parameters. And in this case, I think we shall also date time. And in this case, I'm just going to prefix it with a p underscore. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, there's a thing called SQL injection, meaning that these smart people can inject stuff into your URL, perhaps on a web page, and figure out how to call the stored procedure without really going through your application. And they can send in stuff by injecting queries like where they say where 1 equals 1 and whatever, and they can get a hold of your SA account and drop your database or take it ransom or steal all your data. So one good practice that we learned over time is that you create these parameters within your stored procedure, and that way it kind of blocks them from injection. So just say no to SQL injection. So in this case, we're just going to set our local variable. These are called local variables, and these are exposed to the outside world. So I think in Oracle they had public, private. I can't remember. It's been like 20 years, but it's 15. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and do that. So now those parameters, which when you call the stored procedure, you input your parameters, which will be this one, and then as the stored procedure runs, it's going to pass it to its local parameters. And the thing is, you have to put that, and then you got your start and end date, and that's real nice and everything. So we're going to go ahead and put a where clause greater than or equal to this, and less than or equal to end date. Now, what you have to remember is that we don't necessarily want to use the date key now that I think about it. Let's go ahead and run this query and see what fields are available. Okay, yeah, so the order date key is available even though it's not in the date format. So one option, which I'm thinking of doing, is to convert that to a date. So, one moment, please. So, we got a phone call, so I had to put you on pause there. Anyway, we're back. So, where were we? Oh, yeah. So, basically, what we like to do is to wrap our store procedure with a where clause. And in order to do that, we had to go over here to grab our field, which is called order date key, right? So then we grabbed it from here, called our order date key, and then we plug it in our, what do you call it, the where clause. And then you'll notice this is going to error. This is not going to work. It did work. How about that? But anyway, the problem is that this is a date, and this I don't believe is, because if we were to go back into the view, for example, and the view, that's wrong database, the view over here, if we were to refresh, and then look for our field called order date key, it is an int. Okay, so what that tells me is that, first of all, I'm going to remove the where clause from the view. So now, instead of restricting it to that 1013 rows, it's going to return the entire data set, and we're going to actually dynamically limit the where clause, the result set based on the where clause, based on the parameters which you input, which we store off in a local parameter. So what we would have to do, just to make it easier, is to to declare these things as ints. So by doing that, if we change this, we have to change this. So now the thing should compile, which it does. So actually, this doesn't require any modifications whatsoever. So what we can do is actually go to our stored procedures, which are here. And right now there's none. We're going to go ahead and refresh it, and there's still none. We're going to create the stored procedure in this database. And guess what? It compiled. So that's lovely. So what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and refresh, and sure enough, there's our stored procedure. And we could go ahead and modify it, and we could do that, or we could go ahead and execute it, or you can script the procedure to execute it down here. Now that's typically what I do, but you can do it how you like. And then what it does, it actually predefines the parameters for you, and then it gives you the option to set your own parameters. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create that. And then in this case, I'm going to go ahead and set that parameter. And if I remember correctly, it does return data for the, perhaps, we'll go ahead and set it for 2015, 1231. And so essentially, if you read through it like a book, you have your database, the RC is what it's going to return, and then your start key, your end key, and then you set the variables, the parameters, and then you go ahead and execute. If we obviously check it, it compiles, and then execute, and we get no data. So let's go ahead and see the date range. Oh, it was 2005. So I think if we just modify this and change that to this, guess what? We got data. And it's that same 1013 rows I was telling you about. Now, what I can also do is I'll go ahead and set this to 2000 and set this puppy to 2025. And essentially what it's doing is returning the entire data set, which is 60,398 rows. So that's pretty cool. And then at some contracts we worked on is that what we do is we call this from SSRS. And in SSRS, when you're connected through the web portal, it actually retains your user ID that you used to log in. And we accept that as a parameter. It's a default setting in SSRS. And we pass that to the stored procedure. And the stored procedure can then limit the data set to view the contents that you're allowed to see based on some lookup table, perhaps. And that's how it works. So it's really a cool feature. The stored procedure, you can have a slew of these parameters and make it totally customizable. And then it's really cool. And then that's basically how it works. So if we backtrack, what we did is we had a table. We wrapped the table with a view and limited the fields in the view to what the user could see. And then we wrapped the view in a stored procedure. We added some parameters. We added the local parameters to prevent what's known as SQL injection. And then from there, we executed the stored procedure, supplying the begin date and end date of the order date, and we got success. So what we could do is we could wrap the stored procedure in an SSRS report and then throw it on the web, the portal for SSRS, and then the user could be accessing their data through a stored procedure, logging in through valid connections, and that they have sufficient privileges in the SSRS folder, and everybody's good to go. And then they could say, holy cow, look at all these orders. We should hire more people. So that's how it works. And anyway, as always, this is John Bloom from Bloom Consulting. Hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more videos in the future, and thanks for watching.